So today we are making the ball snowman freebie. That was the freebie for the Black Friday sale yesterday. If you haven't got it, we extended it for today because we were hoping to do the tutorial Saturday or Sunday, but my weekends are just nutty with sports, and we had a couple reschedules come up that I couldn't squeeze it in without driving myself crazy. So we bumped it for today. Black Friday sale is extended, so there's 80% off right now just till the end of the day, so there's only a few hours left. And the snowman is free up until the end of the day as well. So I haven't stitched it yet, so I can't show you, but you can go on the website to look, and this is the general idea of them with the face, hands, feet, and they're shaped like a ball. So that's a 5x7 to give you an idea of size, and that's a typical 4x4. And then this ginormous guy is the 6x10. So they're very big, nice and fun. Kids love them, throw them around, have fun with them. And so we're going to be doing the snowman. So there are 3 hoops in that, and I've got my first hoop stabilized, which I'm using a heavy tearaway, and I've got my supplies here, so I'll go through them with you. So the first hoop is going to be our hands and our feet and our carrot nose, which is 3D on this one, which is cool, and it looks kind of scary, but it's not, I promise. And so I've got I just cut a strip about 5 inches wide for the 5x7 feet, because I'm going to make it match my snowman. And then I'm using a fun sparkle, because you know, if it's not furry, it's got to sparkle. It's a Stretch Performance knit, so it's really like super stretchy. But I've ironed some fusible mesh, polymesh stabilizer on the back, and that controls the stretch, which is going to make it a lot better for stitching, and it's also going to make it better when we stuff the nose, because if it's too stretchy, you're going to get like a huge Pinocchio nose, and it's not a great look. And then I'm doing fur, because I'm Mary, and fur is how we roll. And so I need some water-soluble stabilizer to help control, some topper. So that's like the clear, plasticky stuff, and it just rips away, or you can wash it away. So I have that for fur. And then for any of the ball stuffies, you're going to need 4 equal panels to make the main body. So this one on the stitch map, if you look at the stitch map at the bottom, it'll tell you the exact size, or you can use your hoop size. So I typically cut with 1 to 2 inches seam allowance around the edge. So for a 5x7 hoop, I would cut a 7x9 fabric. Now this one is a little bit less tall, so I cut it just 5 instead, but always better a little bit more than a little bit less. So there's 3 hoopings. I think that's all my supplies. Of course, you need thread and scissors and stabilizer and the design and all those just obvious things that we always have. And so we're going to start with hoop 1, so you're always starting with the first hoop. So I've gone ahead and loaded it onto my machine, and you're just going to stitch the first step, which is just a placement to show you where everything goes, so we know where to lay our fabric down. Now there's 2 versions of the hoop 1. There's an open and then just one that says nothing. So on the open version, your limbs have, that's weird. My machine's not moving. Technical difficulties, I think. On another try, take 2. Alright. Let's embroider without a little bit of technical difficulties. So the first little basting box is to show you where the carrot nose fabric is going to go, and that's going to be the full amount you need for front and back. Seemed to decide to move that time, so we had some sort of, I was moving the hoop around a whole bunch to make sure it was all in frame, so maybe I just made it sad. And it's the open version. So the open version is going to have a little tiny hole, which are the biggest ones here. So it will have a little tiny hole along the side seam so that we can add these flat, and so we don't have to deal with a lot of bulk, and we can stuff them after. If you don't want to stuff them after and you hate hand sewing, which I know everybody hates hand sewing, you can use the closed, but I personally love the open. I love not dealing with the annoyance of bulk, and so I'm a big fan of that, and I'm always going to suggest that that is what you use, because that's how I feel. But you use what works for you. So we've got our basting box for our nose, and then our feet and our hands. So obviously you want your nose a different color than your hands and feet, or I would assume. So that just shows you where you have to lay your fabric, and so you can try not to have anything overlap. So let me check what we got here. Okay, so our step 2, just winging it here. That's how I roll. Instructions, huh? I've done a few of these over the years, you know. And the ball stuffies kind of look intimidating. I honestly, myself, I'm a pretty veteran stuffy stitcher, and I was pretty intimidated to do them. But then I did one, and I was like, oh, never mind then. That's not that bad. And I'll show you the tips and tricks that I've learned to make it the best that I could do. So everybody's going to have their own little ways, but I'll show you how I do it. I know some of the testers do it other ways, but this is just how I do it. And you can take what you like and leave the rest. So, sorry. I'm going to lay fabric over the feet and the hands all in one big strip, and I'm just folding it right sides together and laying it just over top of the feet and the hands. Now you can trim away after you're done if you're worried, or if you just want to walk away and sort of have more leeway, but I don't like to waste fabric, so I like to try and use as little of it as I can. And I'm just going to go ahead and, oh, I didn't change my bobbin. Oh, I don't want to do that. Put in a fresh bobbin, so that's okay. I'm just going to roll with it and finish it this one. Okay, so we're just stitching step 2, which is going to be the outline of the feet and the arms, and again, I'm using the open version, so there's a little jump in each leg to make a little tiny stuffing hole. So it's very little hand sewing, which is always nice for everyone. And these are my go-to tool of choice, tweezers to stuff those little limbs, because it's hard to get your fingers in those little holes. You could make them bigger on some of them, but sometimes it's just a size issue because some of the limbs are not overly large. Like the 4x4 doesn't have an open version because it's just so little. There's just not enough room to put a hole in there, and honestly, because the limbs are so small, you don't even really need to stuff them, in my opinion. But you can give a light stuffing, or you can use a layer of batting in them. Like, it's really to each their own. Normally I wouldn't bother cutting these, but I just want to show you cardinal rule 1: don't cut jumps while the machine is running. Very, very simple rule. So I'm going to try and watch for questions. So if you have questions, I know Kelly's on here, Abby's on here, MC's on here. So there's lots of people who can help you answer questions as well. If you have any at all, or you want to see anything closer, or have anything explained in more detail. Just ask. Okay, so there are little feet, simple as that. We had the right sides together. You can see right there, there is a little tiny hole on each limb so that we can stuff it after we're done. If you don't choose the open version, that will just stitch straight out, and you'll have to either leave it unstuffed or lightly stuff it and add it lightly stuffed to your hoop too. Now, while we get that off, let's change this bobbin. Playing some full bobbins. Not on the ball at all. I always have to get something. There's scissors. I don't know that. Grab my 400 other scissors. I think it's the law that if you're embroidery, you have to have like 600 pairs of scissors. That's because I lose mine all the time. Okay. So, let's see what we got next. Like I said, I'm just winging it. So, okay. So, step 3 looks like a marker. So that's just to make sure if you had your edge there so that nothing gets caught up in your fabric. So you can stitch that out if you want. And then I know my 770, if I skip, it just goes to center anyway, so I have to stitch these, but this one just goes right to the thing. So it's just a couple markers to keep the stitching or the foot from getting caught up in any of the bulk of that material. So it's a neat feature that Kelly has in most of her designs to try to make them as stitch friendly as possible. Okay, so we have our little details on our carrot nose. So I'm going to break out the sparkle and I'm going to place it over that black box that is there. With a little bit of seam allowance. And then the details, you could do in black, or we could do a nice dark orange. I want something to stand out. I don't have a lot of really dark oranges, so I think I will roll with black. Just so we see those details. I'm planning for that color. I should have picked it out before. I probably have one rolling around, maybe like copper color. I have a copper somewhere, but I don't see it. Oh yeah, it's down there. Alright, we got black loaded, so we'll go for it. Step 4 is our little carrot texture details. So we just laid our carrot fabric over the basting box from step 1. And we're just going to go ahead and stitch those little details. Fur and sparkle. That's how I roll. Everybody knows that. I really like the sparkle. And I really like the fur. I don't know if I have issues, but it's just my daughter's exact same way. She was down here playing with me the other day. Probably have some, and she just pulls stuffies at random, so she, paying attention here, she pulled the sparkle. And she pulled the sparkle. Look, even orange sparkle too on those guys. So she pulled a couple more, but I think I pulled them away. I put them away. But she just loves the sparkle and the fur and the rainbow. Like I really thought I lost old rainbow reindeer. How's that for a twister? I do have a thread cutter on this machine, but honestly I find it more trouble than it's worth. Thread always jams, yank things off kilter, and control freak stitch myself. Ooh, sparkle! So we've just got the little groove lines in our nose. And we are going to be moving on to just the final outline. Now this sounds kind of scary, but it's not, I promise. So you're going to very gently, see if I can do it on camera, rip up the stitches from this side, just up until that half line. So you just leave that there. Okay, you're just ripping the stabilizer from those detail stitches. I'm just going to cut it away on the back so I have a little more freedom of movement. And this just makes you not have to have another hooping to do the back of the carrot in the front. This is just kind of a quick way to do the carrot. So all you're going to do is you've got that fold line there, which is a new thing that Kelly has added, because I've done these 3D noses before and I like it. It's a great idea. So, and we're just going to fold it over taut, and we're just going to stitch the next step, which will stitch out the final outline to make our carrot nose. The carrot nose does always have open. Even when you choose the non-open limbs, the carrot nose is always going to be open, because you just have to stuff the 3D noses after. It's not going to work if you stuff it before you add it. It's just too much bulk and you're asking for trouble, and I don't think it's wise. So I'm going to match my orange for my final outline so it blends. That it is lined up, but that half line is like fabulous. I love it because it makes you know that you do have it lined up. Well, that's great. Always improving, which I love about Kelly. Never satisfied with what it is. Always wants to make it better, which is awesome. I've ever done a carrot nose. I've done lots of, I guess that phoenix there has the 3D beak, so I'm going to show you that again. So I did that one, obviously, but so that's the kind of look we're going for, except it's going to look like a carrot and not like a beak. And I've done lots of those, but I don't think I've ever done the carrot. It doesn't ring a bell. Okay, so now we're going to stop, but there's one more step, but we don't stitch that. So step 6 is the stop star. So almost every newer stuffy has a stop star after a hoop to prevent it from recentering. So if we were to go back to the center of this hoop, sometimes there's bulk there, sometimes there's fabric, and it gets caught up in our foot, and then you hear this awful grinding noise. It just makes you like, no thank you. It's like a bad noise. Like gives me the heebie-jeebies just thinking of it, and we want to avoid that. Honestly, it's probably not great for our machine. It's definitely not good for my nerves. Okay, so nose. So we've got our nose. We have the right sides flipped together, and it's got a little opening for the carrot nose. So yay. So let's hoop one. Done! Alright, I'm going to attempt to go to my hooping station, and hopefully I have enough line on my mic. Which I think I do. Okay, so you unhoop, hoop one. And we're going to grab another piece of stabilizer, and we're going to put a fresh piece. I'm using Tearaway again. I use that most of the time with stuffies. The odd time, like stabilizing is, it's a process to learn, and it's going to depend on your project, but it's also going to depend on the fabric you're using. So like on that stretchy fabric, this on tearaway would be terrible. This, I would always, anything with like a significant stretch, even some fleeces are excessively stretchy and you need that extra oomph of a cutaway, or, I mean, polymesh is my go-to. It controls your stretch and it gives you the stability of a cutaway. And you can never over-stabilize, like, as long as you're not being like 17 layers of cutaway or something like that. But really, adding an extra layer when you're unsure is never going to put you awry, I don't think. And the thing about embroidery, supplies are expensive, but your time is the most expensive thing if you're counting labor that it's taking in. So I'd rather throw a small piece of stabilizer on to make sure that I haven't put that on, take it off, because I knew I had to take it off. I'd rather throw an extra piece of 10-cent stabilizer on it, and if you pay more than that for stabilizer, I buy like huge rolls, and they're so cheap compared to like buy the bolt stuff. I mean, you can probably get good deals on buy the bolt, but I'm just like to avoid people, so I just order big rolls of it online. Alright, so we're moving on to hoop 2, and this is going to be the bulk of our work. Again, these look kind of scary. There's really not too much different about hoop 1 and 2 than a regular stuffy. There's a little bit on the arm adding in the side panels, but not too much. But it's just the third hoop that's a little bit different, but once you get the hang of it, once you concept it really, like it's not even difficult to do, it's just sometimes it seems obscure in the concept. So I always use hoop 1 to tack things down, but I feel like maybe this one has a place to stitch. Let's have a peeky peek. So okay, so this one does have a built-in placement. Normally with most stuffies, you just lay your fabric down right away, but I guess because this stuffy doesn't take up the whole, I'm guessing that's the logic behind it. So we can go ahead and stitch step 1. And that's where you get your tearaway. Yes, I get it from Super Punch, which is a Canadian company. I'm Canadian, but they do sell on Amazon, and we have the link to that product on the website. We have a section called Products We Love, and I have a lot of Super Punch products that I use on there that I personally use. They're almost exclusively my stabilizer to go to. So that's a roll of fusible polymesh. I've got several more there, and then I buy the big rolls of cutaway and tearaway, and they're like $40 I think for like, I don't even know. I couldn't even tell you prices right now because it's been a while, because I order like massive amounts when I order, because I don't like ordering paying shipping, so I like to order big orders so I can scoot it all into one. So nothing too exciting about step 1, but I'll show it to you anyways. So step 1 is just showing you where to place your ball. Base material, so this is going to be your face, and sometimes you might want a different color. All the ball stuffies I've made, I just make all 4 panels the same color. I think the narwhal has like a little bottom belly, so you could make the bottom panel the same color as the belly, and maybe the Santa has different stuff. I don't think that's even out yet. I think that's coming out next week. Spoiler alert, I hope it's coming out next week. I'm pretty sure it is. Anyway, so we're going to cover with one of our 4 panel pieces. And because we are using fur, I put water soluble on. Some people like to wait until you're into the detail stage. I just like to get it on, and tack down so it's out of my way, and I'm good with that. It's just, I think it's just like a starch base, so nothing to worry about too much. And we're just stitching step 2, which is going to secure that fabric, stabilizer, to our fabric and water soluble topper to our stabilizer. Where did you get the colorful material in your reindeer? This is, I don't know if they make this anymore. I have like a huge stash of it because I love it. And I'm starting to get low and I'm scared to look because the normal supplier that I get this from doesn't have it anymore. But this is Rainbow Sherbet. Trying to reconnect. We good? Hopefully that worked alright. Are we frozen or you guys can still see me? I just got like a trying to reconnect, so I hope that's not happening all the time. Check my computer and make sure it's still rolling. Waiting for, okay, good. We're still rolling. Maybe. Okay. So this is Shannon Sherbet Rainbow Minky Swirl, or Rosette, they call it. They did have it at fabric.com. They used to, I got it from Funky Monkey Fabrics, which is a Canadian supplier as well. But I don't think they have it anymore. So, I don't know. I'm almost out of it and I'm scared. But it is beautiful. So, hopefully that works. Hopefully we haven't disconnected a bunch of times. That happened one other time. Scary, scary. Okay, so you can see there's a little zigzag line, and that sort of indicates we want to trim. So we want to get rid of some of that bulk there because we are going to add our limbs and a side panel there. So I'm not going to trim away my water soluble just because I don't want it to have a short end and then it falls on top of each other, wraps around the needle foot. So I'm just trimming my minky on those ends. That's just to reduce bulk around adding those limbs on the side. So I just lifted up my stabilizer and trim there. And Kelly's on it. She's got links to fabrics already. Okay, so this is a pretty simple one. There's not as many limbs as normal, and it's not any face appliques or anything. It does have the nose, so what are we on to now? Probably the eyes, so I've got white showing here, so I'm guessing the white of the eyes. So we're gonna just sort of stitch through these steps. So step 3, we're doing the white of the eye. Love to see the trimming of the limbs. I'm never sure in what way on the trimming of the limbs. I haven't cut my limbs yet. So I'm going to rip away the bulk of the tearaway. And I usually work on this stuff while we're doing stitch details that I don't really have to pay too much attention to. Just let me know, Karen, about what you mean about the limbs, and I'll do my best to address it or show it. I'm just ripping away the stabilizer right now. How much will we be on stitching? Okay, so that's going to depend on your fabric, to be honest, how much seam allowance to leave, if I'm understanding you correctly. This rose minky doesn't really matter because it doesn't fray. If you got something that frays, like, so for example, I did this girl in a cotton woven. That's gonna fray. So I would cut either a wider seam allowance or just my normal seam allowance, and then I zigzag the raw edges on my sewing machine because I don't want anything to fall apart. So that would be the answer there. So for these minky, the more seam allowance you leave, it's going to give more bulk, which the pros of that is you have to use less stuffing and you have less minky waste. The negatives are it makes it harder to turn. So if you've got a really skinny piece that's tougher to turn, you may not want to leave too much. And otherwise, I would just literally cut up the center between these and then leave approximately the same, but like there, I'm probably just going to leave that. I'm probably not going to cut it. We'll see. But this is rose minky. It doesn't fray. Some of the fibers might come away that are just the cut fibers, but it's not going to fray away, so you're not going to have that issue. But I would say as a general rule of thumb, you'd at least want 1/4 inch seam allowances, and if you're using a woven that frays, I would 100% recommend zigzagging it or serging it if you have a serger. So I'm very paranoid about stuff falling apart. I figure it's something that's handmade should last. So this stuffy has a two-tone eye, which is a really pretty look. The reindeer also has a two-toned eye. So it uses a layering technique, which Kelly has been using for a few years now, and it makes a really pretty dimensional, realistic looking eye. So it's suggested to use your darker shade first and then your lighter shade second, but really there are no rules, and honestly I've never seen anything come out looking bad. And just changing these eye colors can just really change the way that your stuffy looks. So it's really neat look. So I'm going with a two-tone blue. So I've got the darker shade loaded. And I'm going to run that step 4. And I'm just working on my limbs as this stuff is stitching out, so I'm not wasting time. You don't have to do hoop one and then cut things out. Now, I said I wasn't going to cut that, and I do cut it. It's hard to know till you really think about it. I don't typically do this, but I will show you something that some people do. So, some people will notch out the little hole that's there, because there's no stitching to stop anything there, so it gives you a little bit more, but unless it's a fraying fabric, I don't tend to do that. But I will just show you guys here. I think Kelly does that. It's like a sewing thing, and if you're using a woven, it's a good idea, because it just gives you more fraying room before it's going to fall apart. This is not going to fray. So you're all good. Now put your limbs in a safe place. You're going to think you're not going to lose them, but you will. Maybe not today, maybe not tomorrow, but someday. I can't tell you how many limbs I've remade, how many hours I've spent looking for limbs that I know I made. So I am loading my second eye color, which is a nice light blue, and I will show you after I am done what that looks like. Keep cutting. Now minky scraps you can use for stuffing, and it is heavier than stuffing, so I tend not to use, like, I would never stuff a whole stuffy with minky scraps, but you can always throw some of your minky scraps not going to waste. I don't like waste. I like anti-waste. Last little limb, and I can use that little scrap from my side panels, which I forgot to include in my supply list. So you need a couple little more scraps if you have any off of your limbs. Okay, so let's see if we can get it to focus. So there's the really pretty two-tone me, some people, Kelly says. Lots of people do it. It's not me typically. I try to do it. It's kind of become a habit for tutorial photos, but I wouldn't instinctually do it. Alright. Now I meant to tell you too, depending on your fabric, again, and depending on the eyes, so these are a more dense eye. So you can, I have literally a box full of scraps from the edge of my stabilizer. And you can always take that piece, just a scrap, so it's not costing you anything really, and put it underneath your face, just to give a little bit of extra oomph to your stability. So especially for those really heavy eyes. Now these ones aren't as big as like the reindeer style one. Sorry, I just coughed right in. I went to cover my mouth with my sweater and I coughed right into my mic, so I'm sorry. That was probably like insanely loud. So they're all quite a bit bigger than the other ones, but it will never do you wrong. So when in doubt, throw a little scrap underneath your hoop, and then you've got a little bit of double stabilizing there. Okay, so step 6. Step 6 is optional. It is the lashes portion of the eyes. So, for example, on this guy, I skipped the lashes because I wanted a more masculine look, which I don't know why eyelashes seem to suggest feminine because we all have them, but go figure. Seems to be the way it is. And this one, I did not skip them. So it gives you that customizable option. So I'm going to go ahead and stitch them for this one. We're going to make a girly or feminine or, I don't know, trying to be PC, but a snowman with eyelashes. And again, just cutting out. I've got my hands and my feet cut out, and now I'm just cutting out almost on my feet. Carrot nose, which I probably didn't give enough seam allowance on the top, but that's okay. We're gonna roll with it, because you know, you're gonna have a short carrot nose. So for seam allowances there, some people remove all the stabilizer. That's Kelly. I know Kelly does that. I don't do that. I just pull the bulk away, and we call it good. Okay, so lashes are stitched. So if you do not want lashes, you can skip step 6, and that's always indicated in the step-by-step tutorial. And then it shouldn't be a color change usually. The black of the eye is next. Sometimes, like for eyes like this, I can't remember if it does this first and the inner black, but sometimes they won't be together, but if it's possible for them to be together, they're together. We like to have the option of customizing, but we don't want too many color changes, so we're trying to keep it all together so that we can do that. So okay, so again, there's my little limbs, and these are not too small, so they're pretty easy to turn by hand. I can't find my turning tool. So this is my turning tool of choice. Some people use like a pencil end. Some people use hemostats. Usually whatever you like. So if you find, especially like the arm is a little bit smaller, all I do is I just pull apart the sides and stick my thumb in. And then I stick the dowel in that little indent. And then I just slide the limb over. I've seen people add a little ribbon somehow into here that comes out the top that you can just pull, but I've not tried that. So the machine is just stitching step 7, which is the inner eye, the outer foot of the eye, and the black mouth. So the whole mouth, I guess, if you wanted a different color, I don't know whatever other color you'd use for the mouth, but you could always stop and re-thread. Just have to look. Or if you have software that you can do that on. Is the extra hole so you can stuff them later? Yes, Linda. The extra hole is so you can stuff them later. Right there. There is a closed version if you don't like stuffing them after. There is one there, but I highly, highly, highly recommend the open. You'll get to love hand stitching. I used to hate it too, and I guess love is a strong word. Not mind hand stitching. I don't mind it at all anymore. I don't even think about it. I bring it upstairs and I do it while I'm watching a show or whatever. But I really doesn't bother me at all. Cutting those jumps as we go. So we finished step 7, and we just have to do the pretty little sparkle in the eye. And then I think we move on to the carrot wings. So going back to white. Again, I'm just working on my limbs so that they're all ready for when I need them on this hoop. Usually you add all your limbs on the last hoop, and there are some ball stuffies that have like the tail added to the last hoop in some cases, but most of them are added to the second last hoop from now on. You got a cute little... Sorry, I missed the step 9 is going to be the under eye. Just going to do that in the white to match my white snowman. You could do it in like a slightly darker color than your fabric if you wanted to really stand out, but it's not an element that I want to really pop. It's just finishing the under eye, so I'm going to leave it to match the stuffy color as best as I can, which white is pretty easy to do. Oh, UK fabric. I think maybe it's Australia, not UK. Yeah, I think it's Australia that has a hard time getting furry fabrics. Another hack I use that I tell the testers a lot of time is I'm always on the hunt for furry blankets. If I see a pretty furry blanket, I'm like, that's mine, and it's getting cut up to make stuffies. I make a lot of stuffies out of furry blankets, and honestly, most of our dollar store has like $4 minky blankets. They're like the minky that I would buy in a fabric store. Some of them are a little cheaper quality and do need like extra stabilization, like to control the stretch, because some of them are more stretchy than minky, but in general, they are worth looking for. Scissors under that little jump. Alright. Oh, that. And we have our little cheeks. I'm forgetting all kinds of sticks, all kinds of details. So again, the cheeks are typically always another step so that you can skip if you want. I think I skipped them on my, oh, maybe the reindeer didn't have cheeks. So like the blush, again, seems to be a more feminine look, so a lot of times I'll skip that on the boyish ones. Again, I don't know why, but seems to be the way. Yeah, blankets are fantastic. I love blankets. Yeah, I'm always looking for one. Doesn't matter where I'm at. I'll show you one that I got here. I haven't even opened because I just buy them like massively. So just a furry throw, and it's beautiful, soft, minky. And it's 50 by 60 inches, which is more than a yard or a meter. It's almost like a meter and a half, and that's $4. I can't say no to the fur. But minky is expensive, unfortunately, especially like Lux minky, which the rainbow sherbet isn't Lux, it's just rosette, but there are some like up here. I guess like maybe just being more texturized. That's a Lux minky, and in Canada you're looking at like $18 probably a meter minimum. This came in a scrap pack from Funky Monkey Fabrics, which I try not to grab up too much lately because I have more fabric than I'll ever be able to sew in a lifetime, but they're if you're looking for them, there's some great scrap packs, so you can get a really good discount, and they're smaller pieces, which most people don't want, but for stuffy, small pieces, they're great. So, you don't need a huge piece. Alright. So our face is almost complete, and we have the sort of daunting idea of the nose, but again, looks intimidating, but it's not. It's literally just an applique, and especially with the open version, it's just like applique, and you're going to stuff it after you finish, and it's not nearly as scary as it looks. I'm just going to trim the excess of that back fabric while I have it off, so I don't have too much bulk. Just that extra piece that I added, I just put it away. So we're on step number 11, which is going to show me where my nose is going to be placed. So there's probably... So I don't think, from what I was just talking to Kelly really quick to figure out where we are at. So I'm sorry. I don't know why. Tech hates me, so I was talking about the nose looking intimidating, but it's not. It's very much just like an applique. Sorry if I'm repeating. I'm not sure exactly where I lost you. So it's an open version, so it's no bulk to deal with. We're just basically appliquing this piece onto the face of the snowman, and I always make sure the hole for stuffing is at the bottom, just because it tends not to look as pretty as other pieces. And then I'm just going to match the inside seams and spread them out flat so that there's no excess of bulk anywhere. So I see you guys all popping back on. I'm really sorry that that booted everybody off. I don't know if it's my signal strength, but like Facebook maybe Facebook had an update, because it just like Facebook was gone. It was, normally it'll say like disconnected or something, but it just, Facebook was completely shut down. So I don't know. I don't know what happened. I wonder, like, can you go live from a Chromebook? We just got a Chromebook. Maybe that might be a more reliable source. I don't know. I can't think if that's a possibility or not, but I will look into it. Okay, so we are at the nose. If anybody missed anything, we stitched step 11, which shows you where to put the nose. I am folding it seams together with the hole on the bottom, and I'm just going to lay that over top of my nose and going to tack it down. So probably would have been smarter to leave a little more seam allowance than I did, but that's okay, because a carrot can be multiple sizes. I'm just going to make sure that we're approximately centered there, and this might be a good place for some tape. I'm not a big taper, of course. Connect again. I don't know what's wrong with you. Why you not like me, internet? Sorry, I know that probably glitched out there. So I just sort of taped it where I want it to be. Now the biggest thing about this is you don't want it to get caught on the edge of your fabric and like sort of fold over. So you just kind of have to watch, and I just keep my finger right on the button, so that way if I ever did run into a problem, I'm right ready there, so I can get to the point where too low, trying to make it as long as possible. See, now there, I caught underneath that seam allowance. No, but I'm watching it so that I know that happened. I can just back up a few stitches and go try two. If I had made this longer, or if I put my nose in further, probably, could have avoided this. And I'm going over that center seam because I made it really short. There. Check, check. Tell you what I did wrong here, as soon as we get it out. Not that I did wrong, but what I could have done better. Right, so you can see that. So if I were to do it again, I would move that fabric up a bit, or I would have cut that so that I have a little more seam allowance, because I did catch on that little gapped edge, and I'm probably am pushing it for length just because. So then all you're going to do is you're going to trim away that upper fabric just like you would an applique, so as close as you can to the stitches without cutting the stitches. And then we're going to do a satin stitch over to cover all that raw edge and make it really secure. These are my applique scissors of choice. Everybody always asks that. Double angled. Again, they're in products that we love on the website. I find them the best. And I didn't really like them at first, to be honest. I started it with duckbills, and they were my go-to applique, and I still don't mind those. But everybody always said how much they liked their double angles, so I forced myself to use them. And now I like them better. Okay, so we got our nose there. It's going to be, when it's stuffed, it's going to stick out. And we're just trimmed it as close as we can. Now, I would highly suggest anytime you're doing any of these appliques of limbs or fabric, to use a piece of water-soluble stabilizer over top. It'll help keep your little ends from peeking up over your satin stitch. I just keep a little box of scraps. So this is just something I use for something, and there's always lots of space for small pieces. So I'm just going to slide that over. I taped back down my nose just to make sure that it wouldn't get in the way. And we're on step 13, which is going to stitch our satin stitch over our nose. And I'm just going to really watch it for that first round of zigzag to make sure my water soluble doesn't bunch up or get caught or anything, and then it's pretty good to just trust, but obviously I wouldn't walk right away. Oh, did you get a pair of these scissors, Sally? I love them. They're very good. They're very good at getting it nice and close, which I like. So I hate when you can see little fuzzies coming out the side. And I like to use fur a lot. And every time I applique with fur, well, for a while, every time I appliqued with fur, I was like, never again! But now I do it all the time without even thinking about it, because I just love it. Obsessed with fur, so yeah, I get my money worth of everything. I have boxes of stabilizer scrap, I have boxes of fabric scrap, I have boxes of water soluble, I have boxes of the poly mesh that I use just for little sticks. Like, I try really hard, like, not to waste much. Okay, so that's the satin stitch, and we have a nice good coverage. So we trimmed it well there. I'm going to take off my water soluble so you can see. So he doesn't look like a lot right now, but once you get the stuffing in, he's just going to have a cute little carrot nose. Looks kind of funny, but don't stuff yet. You don't want to deal with that bulk yet. Okay. So we are done the bulk of the stitching. We have to do our limb attachment, which is just a little bit different than how you would normally do it for the arms. The legs are exactly the same as any traditional stuffy that you would do. So our step 14 is just our placement to show us where everything's going. A lot of times, to be honest, if I'm not testing, I'm just skipping these steps because I don't need them. It's nice to know, like, to visualize if you're new to them, but for me it's just wherever my needle is for my tack down, I just throw the limb underneath there. So you were sewing together. I sew together pieces too. Yeah, I will base stitch cutaway or tearaway way if I need to. Doesn't always happen, but okay. So I should have probably done this in contrasting colors so you can actually see it, but I'll attempt to show you. So you can see there's a placement line there for your arm and your leg. And your leg, it just isn't the same color, so it's probably, I should have done it darker so you could see. And your leg. So we're going to do the arm first. Okay, so this arm is where we're ending, and it's the same idea as the biggest cause of needle breaks is when you have things caught up so that your machine is trying to move, but your whole foot, and I don't know if there's a word, is that just the whole thing called the foot? Anyways, it can't move because it's wrapped around fabric, and it causes your needle to snap. So I always make sure, and you can use a layer of water soluble over top of this. If it's super furry fabric, I would highly suggest that. I'm not going to, because I'm just going to watch it closely, and that's your call. So I just put my limb just under where my needle is. I don't want to put it in front of the needle, because that's how you're going to get things flying. That's how you're going to get things wrapped around your needle head. So again, when I'm adding limbs, adding backs, I am always right here at my machine. I don't press start and walk away. I am right here waiting, because if anything goes wrong, I can be here to stop it in time to save it. So I'm here watching, making sure no fur is wrapped around, no limb is getting caught up. And if the earlier you catch an issue, you can save it, whereas if it goes too far, it can get all jammed in your machine and then your project is ruined, which is never fun. So then, so the next steps are going to be the feet, which are both a little bigger than the arms. So that's sort of my trick. If I want it there, I take it and then mirror it over the line. So it should be inside with the seam allowance on the outside. You can't really see, but I try to make it so that my stuffing holes are on the outside. I can't find my stuffing hole in that one. There it is, on the outside, so it just makes it easier to stuff, but whatever you like. That way. The fur is very forgiving. Limb is just underneath. You can tape them down, especially if you're using a multi-needle. You probably want to tape rather than having your fingers in there. You can't. It's a little harder to get your fingers underneath a single needle, but I suppose it could probably be done. Okay, so the limbs are usually mirrored for symmetry. So if it starts on the outside of the right foot, is going to start on the outside of the left foot, so that if you're adding it right underneath your needle, your foot's going to be the same on either side. So it's going to stitch backwards just to prevent getting caught up in that limb. Okay, and then our last arm going the other way. That's mirrored, it's going up and yeah, a lot of people tape, and it's really whatever you like to do. And to peek at the stitch map again, I haven't done a ton of these stuffies. I just want to make sure I'm not confusing you. Okay. So we've gone ahead, we're on step 19, which is going to be adding our side panels to our stuffy to hide that raw edge of the stuffy. So we're going to add a panel here so that the limbs aren't like right on the end. So there's the end of the stuffy, and it's actually on the front of the stuffy, so we're adding that little panel in there. So what you're going to do is you're going to lay your fabric down for step 19, and I'm just using the scraps off of my limb cutout, and you're going to lay it down with the bulk of your fabric over here and the seam allowance here. It's going to stitch down that line, and then we're going to flip it over. So that will hide your raw edge of your limb ad, your arm ad. So stitching step 19, fabric right sides together. You don't need a huge piece for this, depending on how big the size of your stuffy is. You can sort of see in your head, or you can see on your screen, how how big that corner should be to make a natural oval progression. I don't know if you guys need to see this or not, but I'm trying to show as much as I can so that way if you do need to see it, I've shown it to you. Okay, so it's just tack that down, and then all we're going to do is flip it over, and then it's going to tack in place here. Again, you can use water soluble over this piece because it's not a detail stitch we're going to see. I'm not going to. I mean, I have tons of scraps. It's not like it's pasting, it's just a bother that I'm not going to bother with. Again, you can take this panel down if you like. Normally I don't take off so much, I'm just trying to show you guys everything. So that's just tack that down in place, and you can trim away that excess. So I'm going to use it on the other side. Okay, so again, step 21 is when you can choose to skip or not. It just makes it so it doesn't drag across the limbs and get caught up in that limb. So you can either skip ahead if your machine doesn't recenter. I know my 770, if I skip ahead, it goes to center default. I don't know if that's a setting that I can change, but I just typically stitch them just to make sure that the machine goes in the path that I want it to go in. If you have a multi-needle that the needle lifts way up and that's not a concern, you can just go ahead and skip. But on a single needle, I want to make sure that the machine doesn't get caught up. So we're doing the exact same thing on the other side. We're just laying down our fabric, right sides together. Allowances matched. And we're going to stitch step 22, which will tack down that seam. Again. Tack down. And both little arms. Little seams covered on the arms. We're almost done, yay! These are probably the most finicky steps to come, but again, I'll show you the tip on how I find it easy. Even this hoop really isn't that difficult. It's your next hoop that's your final hoop that's just a little bit different. I will show you a hack that I found that I find easy. So we've got our little hands here wedged between our seam, our feet, which will come out when we are turning him right side out. We just want to make sure those are all tucked up in there along with your nose. You don't want your nose over top of your outline there. So if it's mine isn't really close, but if it is close, if you made a longer nose, then you just want to maybe tape it up a little bit to make sure that it doesn't get caught in that final outline. And he had his nose all squishy. I'll show you before I take this off. Okay, so the final two steps, well, the three steps, but the two steps that we stitch are a green and a red. So the first one is going to be the line across the top, and the second one is going to be the line across the bottom. So what we need to do is we're creating our upper and lower panels there. So we're not adding one piece on top of that, we're adding two. So we've got one on the top and one on the bottom. So those two pieces are the ones we're adding, and then our final hoop is going to be that back hooping. So we don't want them to overlap, so they're done one at a time. So I just take one more piece of my panel, and I'm going to lay it directly over top of that, making sure that it covers the whole placement line that is there. And we're just going to, so we got right sides together covering the whole face. We're just going to stitch the upper line only, and then we're going to stop and we're going to add the second piece, and I'll show you how to do that too. I'm just double checking that I have everything covered. Making sure that all of our limbs are tucked in and not on the final outline. Now the upper doesn't have any limbs, so it's not too much of a concern there, but for example on the reindeer, I can't find my camera, I think I'd be used to this by now, you'd have your ears and your antlers up at the top. Making sure my fabric stays flat. Again, you could pin this outside of your stitching area. You don't want to have pins on the inside. Or you can tape it, whatever your preference is, but I just tend to be, I feel like I'm lazy and I don't want to bother doing any of that. And I don't like wasting tape if I really don't need to. So, I'm consistent if nothing else. Okay, so we've just stitched the top. And then what you're going to do is you're going to fold that fabric up out of the way. And we're going to add our second panel, covering the whole thing again. You don't want it to just cover that half. You want it to cover the full hoop. We want 4 equal panels. And we're going to stitch our bottom line. So this is where you will have a little bit of bulk going over your feet. If you use the closed version, it's not going to be nearly as much bulk, but there is some. So I'm never walking away during these limb attachments. I'm paying complete and utter attention that this needs to make sure that nothing gets caught. Sometimes the bulk will just go under. Your needle foot will get caught underneath, and then your foot is trying to move and your needle's going to snap. You can rip your project right out. You can have constant stitching on the same spot, which is going to drive your needle in. So we're going over the leg there, so you can stop if you're worried about it and just make sure everything's smooth. Flip it up and have a peek. Again, you can pin this stuff, you can tape. I know some people are avid tapers. Usually in the tutorial, if there's some tape involved, this probably isn't best practice. Make sure that is out of the way. We're almost done this hoop. And then step 26 is just our stop star. This is super important. If we stitch this, most machines are going to go back into center. And if we're dragging into center, especially if you have stuffed limbs, you're going to have a lot of bulk, and that's probably going to catch. And you're probably going to set your calibration off, and you're going to have to reset, and it often makes an awful noise as per normal. And this is the moment when the kids come hollering needing something. Yeah, they're in bed now. It's late here. I don't know what time it is. 9:23. Okay, so you've got 2 pieces of panel with your face peeking out there. Peekaboo. And that's all we have for this step. So you're going to go ahead and unhoop that. Mary asked in the part 1 video why my stabilizer is so long. That's how wide my stabilizer comes on the roll. And if I were to cut it here, then I've lost this from here to here of usable stabilizer. So I usually just leave it one big piece, and then when I'm done, I rip right next to my stabilizer, especially because the Pfaff doesn't have a 5x7 hoop, which is annoying. So I don't even know what this is. I think it's like a 140 by 150, so it's like 8 5x7, so it's like 7 by 10 or 11 maybe? I'm not sure. Anyway, so you can see where my hoop was. So I've like saved that much stabilizer, and then I just hoop again right next to it. And then if it's shorter, I can use my 4x4, or I can turn it this way and do 2 5x7s or whatever. I just try to maximize my stabilizer as much as possible, because as much as it's pretty easy and cheap when you buy in bulk, I just don't like it going in the waste. It's just, if I can save it, I'd like to. So I've always done that, and that's just the way I do it. So I always just hoop with any excess on the side, and then when I stitch this, I'll have here, which is probably enough to do another 4x4 hoop, or I can baste 2 pieces together if not. So that's why I do it that way. But feel free to cut yours if that's what you like. If it bugs you to have that tail out there, and usually I put the tail the other way, but this is a short tail, so it's not going to get in our way. It'll be okay. So we gotta load our hoop. 3. We're almost done. This hoop's like very minimal stitching, but it's just the concept of it. So I will show you a mess of bobbin thread from pulling it eggshell so much. Okay, so I'm just going to take the bulk of my tearaway off, and then the outer edge of my water solid bill. Okay, so what do we got here? Look at the stitch map for this. Make sure I tell you that is right. Okay, so yeah, we do have a placement on this one first, so we're just going to stitch step 1 right on the stabilizer. Sort of get a little sneak peek of him so far, so he's almost done. We just got to get his back panel, and his nose stuff will make a big deal. Okay, so then you're going to take your 4th panel, your 4th piece of fabric, and you could use water soluble again on this, but there's no detail stitching other than the little arrow. And I know where that is, so I'm not going to waste a piece. So on this hoop, there's a little arrow at the top of the stuffy. On stuffies that don't have tails or where up and down doesn't really matter, because this has no difference, it doesn't matter, but you would want to put your face so that the top of the face is at the up arrow. So I will do that, but for this case it doesn't matter. Okay, so here is the tricky part. And prepping for me is number 1 for this. So in order to get a nice, round, smooth ball, you want 4 equal panels. So the way I do that is I tuck one of the sides of fabric completely in, and it's very important that you get it completely in so you're not cutting it too. And I'm going to take this, I'm going to do it on camera, and I'm going to trim just that top half with a seam allowance, so like 1/4 to 3/8 inches maybe. So I'm just cutting the base fabric that has the face and one of the panels that's flapped up. Okay. Furrow fly. When I'm cutting Minky, I usually just give it a shake there in the garbage bin to help bring down the bulk. So I've cut that panel there, and that panel is already cut there. And then I'm going to take the piece that I cut and tuck it in and do the same thing on the other side, so that I make sure that all 4 of my panels, my face and my upper and my lower and the back, are all approximately the same size, because that's what's going to give you a nice round ball shape. If you make the side panels too wide, it would be like an oval, making it taller than wider. And if you make the side panels too short, it could be like more football looking, so, which is okay. It's just, if you want a nice round stuffy, the key is making sure that those panels are about the same size. So, and it doesn't have to be pretty, obviously. Mine isn't at all. Okay, so I've made that panel the same size as the front panel, and that side one the same size as the front panel. So I've got two panels the same. So someone's asking, did you cut the excess that you didn't stitch down? On which part was that I didn't stitch down? Like on this piece or on the main piece? So I haven't got to the main piece, but I am going to do the same thing on that one. Just, especially on Minky, it's harder to see the line. So I'm going to go around and trim this with a seam allowance. I'm not going to cut it really close. I'm going to try and get about the same seam allowance as I have on that. And I'm going to trim all the way around so that I can match up all my seams. And then I can try to have the most round ball that I possibly can. I'll show you after I'm done. Give a little shake, a little blow into the garbage can, or on the floor in my case, because that's how I roll. I'm a messy crafter, and I'm never going to be clean, and I've just come to accept that. I'd like to be clean, but I don't want to put in the effort to be clean. I'm not going to be clean, and I'm happy with that. The folded snowman pieces on the side. They just sort of get flapped back, so I did cut the big bulk of the piece off just to do the other side with that bulk of piece, but the rest of it I just cut when I was doing the cutting of the seam allowances on the outside, so it doesn't really matter until that point that you cut that away. So you can cut it away before if you just want to trim that to keep it neat before you add these side panels. You can, but you don't need to. You can just cut it after when you're cutting the panels. Okay, so there is my hoop 3, and I've cut it with a seam allowance. I'm not cutting it right close to the stitches. I'm just trying to mimic the seam allowances that I did here. Okay, so on this guy, we are not stitching the face. We do not want to stitch this panel at all. This is like the top. What we're trying to do is attach this seam to the upper part of the circle and this side panel to the bottom part of the circle. Okay, so I use this corner. It's going to start over on this corner, and I'm just going to open up those seams, and I'm going to lay this raw edge down to match the raw edge on the hoop 3. the most finicky part of it, and once you get used to it, and I find making that panel cuff was a huge game changer for making sure I had the right spot for me. Okay, so I just lay everything down nice and flat, and I'm just going to anchor this with a couple stitches, and then maybe I'll pull it off so I can show you better, but I can't really show you without anchoring it. So, make sure it's right at the center of that dot. Oh, we're doing the bottom panel. Sorry, my bad. We're going to do the bottom panel first. With my stitch ribbon. See, if we're watching things, then we can fix our mistakes. Alright, my bad. For some reason, I was going to do the bottom. Or the top, I mean. Alright, take two. I went back to the beginning of that step. Normally I wouldn't stop here, but I'm just going to stop just so I can show you how I lined it up, because it's really hard to line it up just freehand. Okay, so I have this panel here well out of the way. I don't want to have anything to do with that panel. And then this panel I also don't really want to have anything to do with. So I'm just folding that back and starting at that seam there. And we're going to line this up here and stitch all the way down. Okay, so we're just keeping that in line. You can tape it there, you can pin it. Pinning would be difficult maybe on the inside. You just want to make sure the pins aren't anywhere in your stitch path. Sorry, I'm trying to read questions and talk at the same time. I'm not talented. I'm just going to back up a few stitches here where I stopped it. So I normally wouldn't stop it. And again, you can pin. I'm more of a hold down and go with you go. And then as I get closer to the other end, I'm just going to stop. I'm just going to make sure that that end is also lined up. As it was on the other side. So we just want the center line of stitching to all come together at the same spot. So, I'll show you what I mean there in a second. Okay, and that marker will just move it away so you can pull it out if you need to adjust it. So I just matched up all these, and then I made sure that that center line here from your face panel sides was at the center of our regular fabric and line that up. So now we're just going to have to do the other side. So you just take all that bulk, flip it back over, and this side's typically easier to do because you've already got it anchored on one side. Just getting it anchored is probably the hardest part of it in the first place. So I just kind of tuck all that fabric in, make sure that my seam allowances match from the side panel or the top panel, and the panel in the hoop. Marker there that you can take that out and readjust and pin if you need to, so you can stitch that if you want to, or that's step number 4, or you can just skip it and then it's going to come back into where that stitching should start. And sometimes if you don't get these ends completely perfect, perfectly lined up, you'll have a very small hole, or sometimes a bigger than small hole on your stuffy on the ends, and you can just hand stitch that closed like you would a turning hole. It's really not exactly perfect, you can pretend. Okay, so we're stitching about halfway, and then it's going to cut. And we've got a marker, so that's going to be your turning hole. And then again, we can stitch our marker, or you can skip it. That's step number 6, just to make sure it doesn't drag across all that bulk of limbs. And then we get to line up our other corner to make sure our corners are all where they should be. To do from the other side and in, and that leaves us with a turning hole, so we can turn our stuffy right side out. Step 8 is just a stopping star. Okay, so someone said they're stuck back at cutting the snowman. When I stitched the side panels on the sides, they only stitched halfway. Can you explain? I'm still stuck on the back. I stitched the side panels. So when you mean the side panels, do you mean the panels on the top and the bottom? So on, like, or do you mean this? See, I would call the side panels the panels that hide the arm. The arm seam allowance, so I just want to make sure I'm talking about the right thing. So, because there's 2 steps on the ball stuffy, so step number 24 only stitches the top portion, and step 25 stitches the bottom portion. Yes, but I'm not sure what you're saying yes to. Okay, the 2 without the face. Okay, so it's only going to stitch half at a time because you're going to add 2 panels. So you've got, okay, you got your little face here. Aren't I artistic? So you're going to lay a piece of fabric over top of that one, and I think it stitches the top first. You stitch half, okay? Then you fold that piece of fabric out of the way and add a second piece of fabric. So you're going to have 3 layers of fabric on that second hooping, and then it's going to stitch the bottom hooping. So sorry, I thought I showed that, but maybe I didn't show it well enough. So there should be, like on your face hooping, there should be a panel on the top and a panel on the bottom. So you should have a piece a separate piece of fabric added to the top and a separate piece of fabric added to the bottom. I hope that helps. So we're all done the stitching part of the stuffy, and I'm just again going to take the bulk of the stabilizer away, but I'm not super crazy like that, or I'm not super crazy, I shouldn't say crazy, I'm not super worried about it. And then you're just going to take your turning hole. Okay, so for the cutting, if you have 2 panels, I was asking about the cutting, I tuck 1 panel in and have 1 panel on the outside and trim that panel, just the 1 panel and the seam allowances, and then I unfold it, tuck the other panel inside, and then trim the second panel. So I've got the stuffy to turn right side out. You can take out the bulk of your water soluble. If you want to wash it, you can. I usually don't wash, I just pick it out with my tweezers. If you have a really difficult thing, like the sloth has a really texturized satin stitch, which is hard to get stuff out of, there is a video in the video section on how I take that out using a wet paper towel. And because I'm impatient, I don't want to wait for it to I want to have to wait for it to dry again. So there it is right there. If you're still having problems, Melissa, you'll be able to go back and watch the video again after we're done the live. So you can go back to that portion and see if you can get to it. But if you're still having trouble, you can just ask again and I can do a more detailed drawing for you when I have a bit more time and we're not on the live, and get the explanation for you, and we'll be done here very shortly so I can help you finish up yours. But when this is done, you'll be able to go back and rewind this video. I don't think it might let you rewind. Sometimes they do and sometimes they don't. So I'm just stuffing up my ball here. I won't worry too much about it. Closing, I typically use a ladder stitch. If I'm using a smooth fabric on a minky, I'll just whip stitch it because I find it faster. And then you can you can stuff those limbs, which I won't do on camera because it does take a bit longer. And the same thing with the carrot nose. So I put my stuffing hole on the bottom. So all I do is take a bit of stuffing in my tweezers, thread in there too. And if you find you need a couple extra stitches taken out, you can take them out. It's a triple stitch, so it's pretty secure, and just give it a couple extra hand stitches in there. So I'm going to stuff that more stiffly, but that's our little nose there. So I'm going to put quite a bit more stuffing in that so it's nice and full, but I don't want to keep you guys to watch that. A whip stitch. A whip stitch is, find a needle here. So a whip stitch is just a very basic stitch. Well, I call it a whip stitch. Maybe it's not even called a whip stitch, because that's what my mom called it. No, you don't stuff the nose before, you always stuff the nose after, because it's just, you're asking for trouble. if you stuff it before, all the noses have the open hole. So a whip stitch, I'll show you on this. All it is just, I just stabbed myself, in and around, in and around. So that's all a whip stitch is, obviously smaller than that, but that would be because the fur is going to hide it. So, and sometimes it's hard to see to do a ladder stitch, where a ladder stitch is going to be, and you see, you can't even really see it on, it's going to be in here. You're putting your seam or your stitch on the inside and coming straight across, making your ladder rung. So that's the difference between there. But yeah, you're not going to stuff your nose before. It's just going to be, you'd have to stuff it before you applicate it. And then you've got a whole bunch of bulk, and I don't think it's ever going to look right, because to me it really needs a very firm stuff in order for it to look like a carrot. Otherwise it's just going to look floppy, in my opinion. So it's definitely some intended to be done after. So if you guys have any questions at all, let us know, and we're happy to help you out, and we'd love to see your finished snowman or any other OAD stitches in the fan group. And if it's obviously, we're going to end the live here, so just give us a tag. Facebook's been really unpredictable with notifications lately, so I'm not sure what we'll get, but I hope you guys learned a lot and that you will make one as well. So have a good night, guys. Bye.